What up, what up, what up? Thank y'all again for joining us. I'm your brother Jam,
I'm your boy Black Hand.
Brother Los on the cab.
and we are the Daily Smoke, and thank you for joining us on this smoke session.
What's up? What's up?
Glad to have y'all. Glad y'all decided to join us, man. We appreciate y'all checking out the show. Hopefully you'll enjoy it. And of course, as always, if you ever want to find out anything about what we're doing, what we plan, what we got
Website.
planned, what we got coming up, check the website, www.tha.dailysmoke.com. If you need to get our social media, whatever, it's all there on the website. And if you want to donate, you can also drop us a donation at $TD Smoke.
Yes.
So hit us
Yes.
up on Cash App.
Yes.
We appreciate anything that y'all might be willing to do. So thank you in advance, and we love you for it already.
Yeah, we need the cash to, give you what you need. So
We're trying to make a better show for you.
yeah, that's we some brothers, just trying to make it.
Hope y'all have noticed the upgrade. So we trying our best to make sure we present you with a professional product. I have to give props to brother Bobby and brother Los. They're our technical experts up in here, and so all the stuff that you've been seeing as far as the improvements, that's coming from them, man. Those are my guys. They making us look good. So thank y'all, man. We really appreciate
Oh
it.
no, dude, this is us. So I'm trying to give the best product for the people out there. So I have no problem spending money on this show.
That's why we call it the People's Podcast, bro.
Right. It's about everybody, man. It's everybody.
Okay, I told these guys before we got started I was going to tell them a funny story about my leg. Now, for those of y'all who don't know, I do wear a prosthetic leg. I was born one leg shorter than the other.
That's
big
that
deal.
mahogany.
Yeah,
That's that mahogany.
that's my thing. So I graduated in 1992, and I want to say it was either senior year or junior year. So it was, if you went to Sterling if you graduated from Sterling in 1992, and you're out there and you're watching the show, you might remember this trip. But we took a trip for that class to Six Flags in San Antonio, I think it was.
I've never been there, so
And
what's it
so
about?
it was, typical stuff, right? It was like Astroworld, just a little bit
Right.
different.
Oh,
So
absolutely.
yeah, I mean, it was Six Flags. It was just in
Dallas.
San Antonio. Yeah,
Oh.
Dallas. That's where it was. So we rode a bus up there, and we went and ran around all day and all this kind of stuff, and then rode the bus back home later on that night. As we're coming home, now mind you, we had been walking around in the damn amusement park all day. So first thing I did when we got into the bus is I took my leg off because my dogs was barking, right? So I took my leg off and I put it up on the overhead little carrier thing. They had like a little shelf up there. So I just put it on the little overhead thing up there, and I think I had my backpack up there too. So we riding home and everybody's exhausted. We've been out in the sun all day. Niggas is falling asleep. Not even 30 minutes in the trip, we all passed out pretty much.
Right.
Hour outside of Houston, something from the bus starts smoking.
It wasn't me.
No, like it was literally like something in the engine started smoking. And so the smoke started coming inside the bus. So of course, bus driver pulls over. He start waking us up. Teachers waking up. All the chaperones, whatever, waking up, and they trying to get us out the thing. So you know how those on the buses, the windows, like the emergency
Yeah.
open,
The door.
pops open like that. So everybody started popping up the windows and jumping out. People was telling me afterwards, they say, John, all we saw was your leg came out the window because I grabbed it off the shelf and I threw it out. And then I jumped out the window and I grabbed it and I just hopped away on one leg.
Hey, you gotta do what you gotta do. You gotta do
Like,
what you gotta
nigga, but
do.
you was moving faster than anybody else. I'm like, shit, it's my life,
You know
nigga.
what I'm saying?
I just woke up and you telling me this bus is on fire.
Gone.
No, nigga. And the
Oh,
leg
hell
is
yeah.
too damn expensive for me to leave. I'm not finna do that.
That's that mahogany. So hell no. I'm shit.
But yeah, man, that shit
That's
to me
funny.
was always the funniest shit because because to me, I didn't even think about it. But then when people started telling me, it's like, no, this is what we saw, nigga.
That's what I'm sitting here thinking. Like I can imagine being, oh man, and watching a leg come out, Jonathan come flying out. He grab his leg and boom, 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 boom. He walk away like
Spider-Man.
But see, okay, and one of my favorite jokes that I always tell that fucks with people all the time, I say, I'm just waiting to catch a metro accident or something like that, something with like mass transit where people won't notice if an extra person gets thrown in, and say, I'm gonna park my shit and get out my car and go take off my leg and just throw that bitch and be like laying on the ground. They're gonna be like, oh shit, did he lose a leg? I mean, like,
I was on that train.
I was on the bus.
That's in Pittsburgh.
Pay me.
In Pittsburgh, people do sometimes get in front of the bus and let them hit them because they pay to settle out of court. They pay $10,000. So a lot of people will risk their lives. And I'm like, if I was a bus driver, I'm making sure you didn't see it.
Well,
Like
shit.
you might get the money, but it's gonna go to your family, nigga.
Dumbass, you saw the bus taking
Well,
off.
actually,
and you walk in front of.
Actually, I heard some shit about some insurance companies that actually send out people to actually cause accidents just to bring that premiums up.
That would be fucked up.
I wouldn't.
But
I
we
mean,
put
I
it
wouldn't.
past them.
I was gonna say I wouldn't put it past them. Hell, I mean, that's exactly the kind of shit that they would do.
Yeah.
It makes sense.
America.
But hey, that's unchecked capitalism. Ding. Oh man.
Love for the money.
All right, man. So
We.
I wanted to talk about one of my favorite authors tonight. And not only my favorite author, but one of my favorite series of hers, because she did a couple of different series. The woman was a prolific writer. She wrote a significant number of books throughout the course of her life. But I'm talking about Miss Anne Rice. If you could, and this was a woman who literally, if you read her stories, you learn her personality because she put a lot of herself into the books. She was raised Catholic. She grew up, kind of that, she grew up in New Orleans. And so she grew up with she's a New Orleans Catholic. And if anybody knows Catholic people from New Orleans, that's a special category of Catholic. So she grew up like that, but she also grew up with a mother who allowed her as a child to express herself as much as she wanted to. So it didn't, even if she was questioning the religion that they all practice, her mom was totally fine with it. And so she did grow up with some questions about her faith and all this kind of stuff. And a lot of that comes out in her books. And the greatest discussion of that takes place in what I think is her, like I said, her best work is the Vampire Chronicles. That's the entire series of her books that cover just the vampires and the world that she created for them and all the things that they can do. I have yet to read anything that really paints such a vivid picture of what living for hundreds of years, might be like, because the vampires in Anne Rice's book don't, like, once they get turned, they don't really age.
Oh, before you go on, Anne Rice, she was born 1941, I believe, if something like that.
1941 to 2017.
Yeah, 2017.
Yeah.
She just recently passed.
Yeah.
But I've, of course, Bobby Blackhand, I don't read. But no, she's done a lot of other books.
Yeah.
But knowing you, Mr. Muse, growing up with you, Mr. Muse, you the one who actually taught me, got me into...
Taught me how to read, boss.
Yes, sirs. Yes, sirs. But no, actually got me into what we're about to discuss.
Yeah.
So
I was so excited when I first read those books. I had to tell somebody about it. And so I started telling him and Ruck and I think David. David was with us. And I would literally, as I would read chapters of the book, I would like, when I hang out with them the next day, I would tell them, okay, this is what happened in the part that I read last night. You know.
And you had all of us captivated because of your
Yeah, I remember
storytelling.
the story they said that Jonathan would start reading, we'd all be like listening, like he would tell us a story, like we had to wait for the next day for the next episode.
Dude,
Yes,
see,
Cool.
I was just
Storyteller, the best storyteller right here.
Well, I was just really enthusiastic about the story because, like I said, up until that point, I had never read anything written the way Anne Rice describes things. And the thing about Anne Rice is she loves tying her stories in with real history. So she tries to be when she's talking about somebody who lived in the 1700s and she's describing that era, she's going to try to be accurate to that era. You know, she doesn't do a lot of the just tropes for the sake of convenience. She'll actually go and describe to you like what that building is like, what those rooms are like, the decorations and that kind of
Details.
stuff. She paints a picture for you, because when you picturing it in your head, like in one of her books, she goes into great detail in describing a house with a keyhole shaped door, right?
Okay.
Then people realized that house was real and it existed in New Orleans. Then eventually Anne Rice went and bought that house. So she was living in the house with the door with the key shape, with the door that's got the key shaped door frame. So, you know, it was really one of those kind of things where like the stuff that she wrote was like, it'll have you questioning, like, does this woman know something we don't? You know, she really paints a vivid picture. Okay, so in the first book in the series, and I'm honestly, hear me out. There's a reason for this. Okay, the first book in the series is called Interview with a Vampire, right? And I'm honestly tell you, this is the only book in the series that I don't like.
Wow. The thing is,
right.
I watched the movie, so I'm learning for the first time, just like y'all are. So.
But okay, and to explain, because when I got introduced to this, the first book that I read was The Vampire Lestat, which is actually the second book. So I read the second book first just because I didn't know the first book existed. But I honestly believe that if I had read the first book on its own, I might not have read the second one. Only because I did not like Lewis's character.
Why?
So the main character in that book is Lewis, and he is a fledgling of Lestat. So Lestat, who is our titular main character, he basically made Lewis, but he gave Lewis a choice. And then Anne Rice's.
Well, before you go on, made, when you say made,
he turned him into a vampire. So Lestat was the one who turned Lewis.
Okay, before you go on, in the world of vampires, how do you make vampires?
So and the thing I like about Anne Rice's the way she did this, it's so simple. It makes perfect sense as far as the way to make a vampire. So her vampires literally will pick a human that they want to turn, right? They'll drain them of blood to the point of death.
Okay.
So not killing them, but almost to where their heart is about to stop. And vampires in her world can sense that. They can feel when the heart stops.
Yeah.
So they know when to stop. And so they get you right there to the point, and then once you're almost there, they like cut their wrist or do whatever, and then give you the blood back. And so as you start drinking the blood, it converts you. And
like a blood transfusion.
Almost, yeah, pretty much a blood transfusion via your mouth, and then
I'm not gonna say nothing.
And then after probably, I think they say it usually takes about 30 to 45 minutes. Your body goes through a physical death. You like vomit and shit and do all that kind of stuff.
That's fucked up though.
Well, because your body no longer has need for those biological functions, so it's got to get rid of that stuff. So it just pushes it all out at once.
Don't eat chicken.
And then you get cleaned up, and then from that point on, pretty much dirt won't stick to your skin even. So
Wow.
you become a perfect version of yourself when you become a vampire in Anne Rice's world. So if you were handsome, you become devastatingly handsome. If you were plain, you become beautiful. You know, the vampirism in her world literally perfects you when it turns you. Now, of course, most people, because you technically are dead, do lose a little color. So even the black vampires is a little pale, you know. But yeah,
I
so
don't know about myself though. But okay.
you get a couple shades lighter. You might pass for like an LB show wannabe.
Bobby Lighthand. Bobby Lighthand.
I would like it.
Bobby
Uh,
Lighthand. All right, go ahead.
but no, so Lestat made Lewis a vampire, and they existed in this New Orleans pre Civil War era. So Lewis was a young plantation owner because his father had died while he was young, so he took over the family business. So he literally was a slave owner. Yes, one of her main characters is a slave owner, and that's also part of the reason why I don't particularly care for that book as well. But you know, I get it. It was the era.
Well,
So
what like 17? Looking from my research, 1791. This is what she set this at.
yeah, it was in the 1700s. Yeah, so slavery was still going strong, and Lestat actually picked Lewis because Lewis was wealthy, and at the time Lestat was broke because he had to flee Europe. Long story short, Lewis met Lestat when Lestat was at his worst. You might want to say he was being real petty and being real petulant because he was angry about some other stuff that had happened.
I think it was dealing with his mom and other stuff.
Well, quite a few things had happened because when we move to the next book, we'll talk more about what happened to him in Europe. But he was recovering for some serious betrayals from when he fled Europe.
Okay.
And so that's how he wound up in America, kind of broke, but latched on to Lewis and got back into the swing of things, so to speak. But the problem with Lewis is that Lewis felt an extreme amount of guilt about being a vampire and having to feed on humans and all of this kind of stuff. Whereas Lestat reveled in it. He loved being a vampire. And Lewis saw that as he just saw it as something being wrong. Like, dude, you're twisted. But it's like, dude, I'm not human. I don't play by human rules.
I don't care anymore.
It's not even twisted. It's like it's like somebody looking at a wolf strange because he ate a chicken.
Right. Like,
you know what I'm saying? That's what a wolf is gonna do. A wolf is gonna eat damn chicken or that deer or whatever.
A predator is a predator.
Right. And so they're predators, but at the same time, they don't. And here's the thing I love about her vampires too. They don't have to kill.
Right.
They can drink just a little bit. You might feel a little weak, a little sick or whatever, but you're going home. But sometimes, because for them, drinking blood is like sex. So sometimes you get carried away.
Right.
You get into that because they describe drinking to the heart stops. She describes drinking to the heart stops for them is like the ultimate. It's like the greatest
orgasm.
The greatest taboo and the best thing you could possibly feel. Like feeling that heart stop and it gives you so much
like an orgasm,
like, power. It's that and then like 5 other things too. So yeah. It's on another realm for them. So all that to say that Lewis's description of Lestat in that book is not an accurate portrayal of Lestat. And that's what I was saying before, is in the movie, Tom Cruise played a good version of Lewis's Lestat.
Yeah.
But to go on and tell the rest of the story, you need a different Lestat. And I think from what I understand, there's talk that they're going to be trying to make a series, a TV series out of her books. And so that might be coming on like HBO or something like that, if I remember what I read correctly. But no, I don't have any information on a date about when that might happen. But if you find this interesting, then you definitely might want to look into that. And if I hear
Check it out.
anything else as far as dates, I'll be sure and mention it on future episodes. So stay with us. We'll keep you up to date as much as we can. But the thing about it is, so that's my kind of beef with the interview with a vampire story. But then you get into Vampire Lestat.
Okay.
And this is where you get Lestat telling his story in his own words. Lestat is essentially he was born in like a rural French countryside like manor. His family like used to have money, but they was like the remnants of this once wealthy family. They lived in a big house, but it was a big house that was falling apart. That kind of situation, you know.
Yeah.
But he was the youngest son of this broke lord basically, and his dad hated him. His dad, because the thing about it is his mom was extremely beautiful, and his dad had basically lucked up and got her in like an arranged marriage, and so all his other sons had come out like him, rough and rugged and kind of whatever, and Lestat came out beautiful. Like he was tall. They describe him as like being like over 6 feet, and muscular. So he wasn't like a skinny dude, but his face, he was just like, from the time he was a kid, he was just considered like a beautiful ass kid. This long blonde curly hair.
Yeah, I
and
think
all
he
that.
was like what 6'2", if I remember.
Yeah,
in
something
the
like
book.
that.
Yeah.
Yeah. So he hunted, he did all of that stuff, that a good son back then was supposed to do, but his dad just hated him and like treated him like shit just because he looked like his mother,
That's fucked up.
And so Lestat grew up hating his dad. Eventually, he winds up running away to Paris, and when in Paris, he decides to become an actor. He ran away with his friend called Nicholas, and when him and Nicholas got to Paris, they wound up getting jobs at a theater, and eventually Lestat was able to work his way up to being an actor on the stage at this theater.
Brad Pitt.
And well, he did a good job, so he was getting a little notoriety, but then he started noticing that every night out in the audience, there was a dude who was like watching him, a really pale dude. And he was like, okay. And he was kind of getting weirded out by it because he kept seeing this same dude. And then one night, he gets kidnapped, and it's that guy. And the guy who kidnaps him is this vampire named Magnus. Now, Magnus, they called him Magnus the Mad.
I wonder why.
Because before he got turned into a vampire, he was actually an alchemist. And he, as far as in recent history, he was the last person that anybody knows of who took vampirism. He caught a vampire and forced the vampire to turn him. Like, he drained his own blood and then drank from the vampire.
Oh shit.
Yeah, so he turned himself into a vampire because he wanted to be one. But then when he became one, he actually hated it.
Basically, he effed himself.
Get what you asked for, So so bottom line is in hundreds of years, because this dude had been around for a while, he had never made another vampire. And in Anne Rice's world, when a vampire does that, when they wait a really long time before they make a what they call a fledgling, that fledgling comes out super powerful. Like, they come out super strong. Whereas a normal vampire just being turned would be, of course, stronger than a person, faster than a person, able to do things. With Anne Rice's vampires, as they get older, their powers increase. So like their ability to move fast becomes even faster, and then eventually turns into flight. Their ability to read minds becomes broader. Instead of just being able to read people close to them, they can influence folks at a distance as they age. So it's all about, so imagine being a newborn vampire, but you got the abilities of a vampire who's a couple of 100 years old already. That's what we're talking about, that kind of difference in power levels.
Okay.
So
it would be crazy.
Right.
Wake up and I'm like, first time I'm a vampire, but I know a whole lot of shit.
So Magnus kidnapped Lestat because basically he figured Lestat was the perfect candidate to pass on his abilities to. So Lestat got turned into a vampire. He literally drank his blood. Magnus drank his blood, then fed it back to him, and then immediately, as soon as Magnus finished that, and he was sure that Lestat had turned and was now a vampire, he had a big old fire going, and he walked right into the flames. and yeah, vampires are extremely flammable. Fire is the one of the things that can like really fuck them up. So,
quick question, with Anne Rice and other vampires, what's the difference between?
well, it's a lot of differences. Hers, even though there's a lot of talk in her books later on about religion and stuff like that, Anne Rice's vampires don't respond to like crosses or garlic or
what about stakes or stake to the heart?
Nah.
That
Pretty much the only way that you can kill these vampires is you would have to
decapitation,
burn them.
Pretty much is burning is the only way that you would be able to guarantee it, and you'd have to burn them to ash.
What about decapitation?
Decapitation, they might be able to recover from depending on how old they are.
No shit.
Yeah. So just cut you cut the head off, but you fuck around and let them reconnect. That shit will probably heal.
It's like some Deadpool shit.
Yeah.
Like some Deadpool shit.
Because like the older ones, yeah, you wasn't even getting close to them to be able to try to cut off their head.
Okay.
They moved at speeds where no, like they could touch you, like run at you and touch you, and it would be like a bullet hitting you. That's how fast they could move. Like the really old ones.
Oh damn! Oh damn!
Oh yeah!
Oh
Back,
damn!
come with something in their face.
And see, so basically, when Lestat got turned, he got no history. Nobody explained the rules of a vampire to him because his maker immediately killed himself. So he didn't understand anything about being a vampire, what it meant.
Yeah.
But what Magnus did do is Magnus left him all his money. Magnus had riches that he had accumulated over the hundreds of years that he had been alive.
Speaking of which, the DDS
Dollar
sign
TD smoke. No.
Go ahead.
But so he basically left this dude wealthy. So now he's immortal. Nothing can hurt him. He is the predator of the night, and now he's filthy fucking rich. Oh, Lestat pours it on. He winds up becoming a rich theater patron. He eventually winds up buying his own movie theater. He winds up buying his own theater because he loved theater and so he puts on actual plays. He hires actors and all this kind of stuff, and he even starts acting with them.
The Batman of his time.
He was pretending on stage, just like in the movie. He was a vampire pretending to be a vampire, pretending to be a human, pretending to be a vampire. Yeah, so it is really kind of cool the way they describe that in the book. So then he runs into I'm going to skip a part. His mother, Gabrielle.
Beautiful.
She was, of course, in her younger days, she had been a beauty, but living with his abusive father, she had aged, she had had a rough life. And so she had been, you could tell she used to be beautiful, but it was one of those things where it wasn't holding up under the stress. And so he found out that she was dying. She had a TB. Back then, they called it consumption. So he... tuberculosis.
Tuberculosis, yeah.
So not being able to face the fact that his mother was going to die, because that was the one and only family member who ever treated him nice, who ever cared about him, he turned her to save her life.
Of course.
So when his mother turns, like I said, her vampirism perfects you. So it rolled back some of that age, some of that stress. Instead of her blonde hair, her hair turned silver. So it went, because she used to have blonde hair, but of course she was older, so it had started going gray. And so her hair turned silver when she when she eventually became a vampire. And as you see in the picture that I chose for that one, she was known for wearing it in just one long braid. That's how she always wore it. And she liked dressing in men's clothes. Says she had always been forced to be a lady her entire life. So now that she was a vampire and it didn't matter anymore, she liked to dress in men's clothes.
Okay.
Well, shit, do whatever you want. You're a
Hey,
vampire.
Who gonna tell her? Who gonna tell her no? No.
Right.
Exactly.
Say no to me.
But back then, you have to realize that, of course, women didn't have the kind of freedom. So in a way, that's almost like a bit of feminism thrown into the book,
Right.
you know, because it's
A relief.
a woman removed from the shackles of patriarchy, because those rules no longer apply to you.
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying? And that's one thing too. Her vampires can't have sex. The book. Well, and it's funny because I think
Yeah, please explain that one. Please explain
I
that.
think later on in her book, she kind of seemed to retcon that, but originally in the book, she said that they couldn't have sex. But then it seems like she found a way to kind of make that work later on, if I'm remembering right.
All these
But
pretty motherfuckers can't fuck.
but I mean, you have so many, like Lestat was literally says in his book, he's like, you don't miss it because everything else, the way they described the world when you become a vampire, it's like you see colors that don't exist to humans. You hear things.
Ultraviolet.
You can
You're already high.
right. You can. Your senses
You're
are so
beyond- you're-
overtuned.
You're
that
already beyond.
everything is just like amazing to you. Like in the movie, there was a scene where when Lewis first got turned, he was walking through a cemetery and he was looking at the like the tombstones and all this kind of stuff, and there was like faces on the tombstones, and his vampire vision was making it look like the faces on the tombstones were like looking at him and like moving like they were real.
Yes,
And
I remember that.
Yeah, so that was trying to give you a visual representation of what it's like for them when they first turn, but supposedly everything becomes like really like amazing. So, you know, the trade-off is there. You don't, you know, you get something, but you get some, you lose something, but you get something else.
I don't know about sex though. I don't need.
I honestly, if I had to be a vampire, I would hope it would be this kind of vampire, because the only thing that I do like about them is that you don't ever have to. Well, you do and you don't, because okay, one of the things that I thought was cool is that however you look when you are turned is
That's what
how
you
you will look
forever.
That's great.
So the length of your hair, the length of your fingernails, the most
Black hand forever.
most scars and stuff like that would probably heal. Like that would probably just go back to being normal.
Okay, yes. Then I want to be a vampire then.
Right. Oh, and for me, what I could do is if I was a vampire, I could turn somebody else and I could kill them, take their vampire leg and attach it to my vampire body.
Wow.
All right, Frankenstein.
Shit.
I could do that.
All right, Frankenstein.
At least I theoretically, I think in Anne Rice's world that
Can
would
they
be
fly
possible.
and shit?
That's one. The older ones do get the ability to fly. Like they can literally just like lift themselves off the damn ground at will. They fly kind of like Superman, you know.
Yeah, I think that they tried to portray that in the movie.
Yeah, they did.
In a way.
they did a kind of, because
Overall way.
in one part of the book version, when Akasha wakes up and she takes Lestat, that's what they literally do. She outflies the sunrise. So she just fly every time the sun gets ready to come up. She would just grab him and they'd fly to a different part of the world where it was dark still.
Yeah.
It was going to be dark for like a few more hours. So she just outran the sun with him because, and all she was doing that whole time was just feeding him her blood and making him stronger.
I wouldn't do that shit. Just stayed in the dark the whole time.
I want to ask this question because you kind of said it earlier, as far as when you turn to a vampire.
Mm-hmm.
That when you're turned at that moment, you stay at that moment.
Yeah.
Wasn't there a child in that?
Well, yeah. Well, there's a couple of them. Okay, so Armand, if you could bring up that picture. So Armand he was turned when he was about 16, 17 years old. So he was kind of caught in the middle of puberty,
Well,
but he was turned because he was beautiful. And
Little
that
pretty motherfucker.
right, he was a pretty
looking like Prince,
uh,
Bobby.
they described his hair as like this auburn red and super curly and all this kind of stuff. So he was, well, okay. I'm not gonna go into each character's backstory, but there's extensive backstory. But before he was turned into a vampire, he was used as a sex slave back in, I think, like the Greek or Roman days.
He looking.
Right. So, but then one of his masters was one of the people who wound up buying him turned out to be a vampire. And the vampire basically realized, like, well, he didn't treat him badly. He treated him good, but then he also realized, like, oh, this boy's intelligent. This boy is this and this boy is that. So he started teaching him things. And then eventually he realized what his patron was and asked him to turn him. You know?
That's fucked up.
But then he regrets being turned at that age because now he's stuck at that body. And then the other one that you were mentioning was Claudia.
Yes.
Which was, and even Lestat says it in the book, is like his greatest sin was turning that little girl into a vampire. He turns a 5-year-old girl into a vampire. And the reason
was she 5?
She was 5. In the book, she was 5.
Okay.
Yeah, in the movie they aged her up just a little bit.
Yeah, Kristen, what's her name?
Kirsten Dunst.
Yeah, that played that role. She was 10 at that point.
Yeah, she was 10 at that point, if I remember.
So kind of, but around that age.
Yeah, but in the book she was actually 5 years old. So she was a vampire. I want to say she was alive for about 70 years total.
Damn.
And
a girl like that?
Yeah. But of course, her mind aged. Her personality grew up, but she was stuck in the body of a 5-year-old.
That's crazy.
We saw YouTube on that one, so
yeah. And eventually, in the interview with the Vampire book, Louis and Claudia turn on Lestat, and they try to kill him. They fail because they don't know how strong Lestat actually is, and how much, even at that point, he had gotten infused with some very old blood. But essentially, they tried to kill him. They threw his body into a swamp, but he managed to come back.
Before you go on, and Anne Rice, and I'm still going off the movies. Sorry, but was it like vampires can't drink from dead blood?
Yeah, that was how they got Lestat. The vampires in Anne Rice's world literally have to feed on living blood. If they feed on dead blood, it's like poison to them. It may not kill them. It probably
but
won't kill them.
The crap
but it's
out
gonna,
of
they're basically gonna start throwing up. They're gonna become extremely ill, and it's like food poisoning for them if you want to think about it along those lines. Okay. So it can and for a vampire, losing blood is losing strength. So if they're vomiting up blood, then they're also losing strength.
Okay.
So yeah, it's a bad situation for them, and that's how Claudia and Louis got Lestat. They've tricked him into drinking dead blood, and when he did, because he got super weak, they tried to if I remember right from the books, I think they did do it right in the movie that they did try to slit his throat or tried to cut his head off but couldn't or something.
Yeah, they tricked him into drinking bad blood or dead blood, and then slit his throat. Yeah, and then tried to get rid of them and real quick.
But it didn't work. That's the problem.
And then also set him on fire and other shit.
Well, the fire actually came later on when he came back.
Yeah,
and then they set him on fire, but that didn't kill him because, like I said, he had fed from the fount at that point. So fast forward a little bit after, back in Europe after he turned his mother. Mm-hmm. So he basically, after he turned his mother, he wound up getting into trouble with a coven of vampires led by Armand, that same redhead kid. So this this kid basically was leading a coven of Satan worshiping vampires.
Okay. In a way, yeah, I can see
And
that.
you would almost think that would be automatic to a certain
Yeah.
extent, but again, her vampires have nothing to do with religion. So for these guys to choose to be Satan worshiping vampires,
They
like,
just
oh, we're serving the Dark Lord and blah 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 blah,
Satanists.
and he's like, why y'all tripping, man? Like, dude. Basically, the stat was like, why are y'all putting these rules on yourselves? What is the devil doing for you?
None.
Y'all are restricting yourselves. Like, literally, they were only allowed to feed on evildoers. They so because vampires can read minds, of course, they could tell if you committed crimes, did any of that kind of stuff. So
Okay.
they knew if you was an evildoer, so they could feed on you if you legit was evil.
Okay.
But then if you did something that was against their rules, you could be like sealed in a coffin for as short as a few days, depending on the
Or
severity of your crime, or you could be locked away in a coffin for years. And for a vampire, being starved of blood for too long, depending on how strong you are,
yeah,
can kill you. You just eventually you'll
starved to death.
starve to death. So you have to have something. So
Got rats and shit.
these were the kind of rules that they forced themselves to live by, and Lestat was like, no, this makes no sense. Why are y'all letting him do you like this, since Armand was their leader? And the thing about it was is that a lot of the vampires in this coven started to listen to Lestat like, yeah, like, you making some sense, you know? It's like, okay, like, why are we doing this to ourselves? So all that to say, he wound up breaking up the coven, and Armand hated him for it because
Of course.
that was Armand's like family or his purpose that he had assigned for himself. But the one thing that Lestat did learn from that encounter with him was the name of his creator, which was this guy named Marius. So Marius was the vampire that had turned Armand. And Marius was, as far as Armand knew, who was a few hundred years old at that time, and I
Yeah.
believe at that point he was the oldest vampire that Lestat had met. Marius, the guy who turned Armand, was even older, and so he had hinted to Armand that he knew something about the origins of the vampires. So Lestat really wanted to try and seek him out. And so he spent the next like few decades traveling around Europe and Asia and stuff like that. And everywhere he went, he would leave messages for Marius, usually carving them into stone on buildings or somewhere. Like, I am Lestat, I am looking for you, I'm seeking Marius, stuff like that.
Emails everywhere.
It was basically, he was spamming,
Yeah, email everywhere. Hey, dude.
So,
Stalking that motherfucker.
but eventually it winds up paying off. He does wind up meeting Marius at some point, and the two of them, as you can see, there's a similarity between Marius and Lestat and their appearance, because both of them were chosen because of and this is in the book, you can read it. It's because of a European bias of what is considered a beautiful man. A blonde.
Well, I'm not blonde.
Right.
Thank you.
Blonde, tall, muscular, that type of build man was what was chosen. Marius was actually turned into a vampire against his will. He was turned by a bunch of druids for a ceremony. And
Not the druids.
So these druids worshipped a god of the woods, and this god of the wood, of course, fed on blood. Now, what, of course, was their big secret is that their god of the wood was really a vampire who they kept locked up under a tree all the year, but on certain festivals, they would basically bring him all the prisoners and all this, and he got to feed on them As much as he could kill him if he wanted to and just get full as a tick. So he went through like periods of feast and famine. But something happened to this god of the woods, and it happened to all the other god of the woods because there was multiples in these druid cults.
Mm.
Just out of nowhere, all of these vampires burst into flame in the middle of the night, or in the middle of the day, even while they were locked away in their underground layers.
Yeah.
They were literally just bursting into flames all over the place for no reason, and nobody could understand why. So now their god of the wood was basically this burnt, crispy, kind of crackly, almost the texture of beef jerky, if you could try to picture it in your mind.
Cracklins.
But he was
Cracklins.
your boy was out there bad. I mean, he just literally woke up on fire. I mean, can you imagine how sucky that's got to be?
Right.
So basically, these druids spotted Marius because he was a young Roman, I think. And he got spotted in like a market or in one of the cities, and they basically was like, oh, he looks like the type of
Boy.
what they wanted their god to look like. So they kidnapped him, took him out. They kept him for a year. Let his hair grow out because he was a Roman. He kept his hair cut short, but they let his hair grow out. They wouldn't let him cut it. They kept his fingernails trimmed and stuff like that. And then when it came time for the right festival, they basically threw him to the god that was still locked up under the tree, who was still burnt and crispy because even though he was still alive, he was old enough to have survived whatever it was that happened to him. Dang it, I lost my train of thought. But even though he was old enough to survive what had happened to him, basically what it was is that he wasn't strong enough to heal, at least not quickly. He would have to get blood from a very old vampire, and a lot of it, to be able to heal that kind of damage fast. So basically what these druids wanted to do is replace him. So they wanted to capture this young dude, let the old vampire turn him, and then they'll take the old vampire out and burn him.
That's fucked up.
You know what? We're going to be running out of time, man. So take us through these books.
All right, cool. So long story short, Lestat eventually goes into the next book with a lot of knowledge about their past, because he winds up meeting in the book Queen of the Damned, he winds up meeting the first vampire, the original vampire, the source of vampirism. And that story is so intricate and amazing that it really kind of boggles your mind how she creates the origin for vampirism in her world, and the way she explains it. It really it involves blood, and it involves possession, and it's really cool the way she did it. And I honestly think it's the best. If vampires did exist, I think this is probably how they would exist, like for real. So I won't
rice.
I won't spoil that, because that's one of those things that when she explains it, it's best to let her do it. So
we're gonna revisit this.
Yeah.
That way you can get, or we can do the rest of the books. But for right
How much-
now,
We can go through them now.
how much time we got left?
We got time. We can go through them, just, quick,
All right,
brief,
cool.
just to get the story out and let people know, hey, go check them out.
So Queen
Yes,
of the Damned,
yes.
he meets Akasha. She is the first vampire. And not only does he meet Akasha, but he awakens Akasha, because Akasha hasn't moved in hundreds of years. And that story just really kind of, it shows you the level of power that she possesses. And then it also gives you a full explanation of the origins of the vampires. Really good story, really compelling the way it was written. She writes it in such a way where you start to question what you know about history, because she ties it in with so much real history. It's really cool. But then you go to the next book, which is going to be after Queen of the Damned, it was Tale of the Body Thief. So in this one, Lestat basically gets tricked by a psychic who learns how to you heard people talk about astral projection where you can
Yeah.
leave your body.
Yeah.
Okay. What this guy learned how to do is he learned how to leave his body, but knock other people out of theirs.
That's crazy.
So if he decided, hey,
Some Doc Strange shit.
I want to live as this 6 foot tall black guy for a few months, boom, I just take your body,
He's gone.
and he's gone. He can live your whole life because he's you.
That's crazy.
Now, the thing about it is this dude has been doing this for a while. He's been men, he's been women, he's been rich, he's been poor. He's basically just been going around collecting experiences of being in different bodies. When he happens to notice Lestat, because since he's a psychic, he can kind of pick up on the vibes of people's minds and things like that.
Mm-hmm.
But he's not able to pick up anything from Lestat. Lestat's like a blank wall.
Yeah.
Because his vampire abilities kind of cut him off.
Mm-hmm.
So either way, he figures out what Lestat is, and then he approaches Lestat about, basically, I want to swap bodies with you. He's like, I couldn't knock you out of your body like I could do a regular human. He's like, so I want to make a deal. So he had stolen a particularly well-built, handsome body that he knew that Lestat would actually want to be in.
Mm-hmm.
And so he basically approaches Lestat and says, let's make a deal. I want to trade you this body for your body because I want to see what it's like to be a vampire, and you get to see what it's like to be a human again. And so, of course, Lestat, being who he is, he agrees to it because he's that kind of asshole. And what happens, of course, as the name of the book implies, the guy runs off with his body. So now Lestat is actually trying to chase down his vampiric body and get it back, but he's stuck in a mere mortal form. And this actually brings me to that picture of David Talbot, because David Talbot is a guy from an organization called the Talamasca. And in the Anne Rice world, they're like the X-Files guys, but they've been around for centuries. The Talamasca basically is an organization that investigates all kind of paranormal shit.
Yeah.
And they, of course, know about vampires. They know about Lestat. They know about all of this other stuff. And they knew about the body thief because he used to work for the Talamasca. So David Talbot was actually an old Englishman who worked for the Talamasca and personally had dealt with Lestat on a few different occasions. So what wound up happening is he became friends with Lestat. Mm-hmm. And when everything is said and done with the body thief, the Lestat does get his body back, but the body that he was inhabiting that he got from the body thief winds up with no soul.
That's fucked up.
And David Talbot, being an old guy, is dying. And so basically they put his soul into this young body. So the picture you see there is what Lestat looked like when he was human, but now that body's David Talbot.
That's fucked up.
So yeah, that's that. I thought that was one of the coolest parts of her stories. Then I think the next one is Memnoch, if I'm right. Memnoch the Devil. Okay. So the Devil. All I'm gonna say is, and there really doesn't need to be too much more said about this.
Yeah,
but,
devil.
Okay,
devil.
Satan, literal Satan, the devil, comes to Lestat and says, "Hey, dude, I've been watching you. I like what you're doing. I like your style.
I see you. I like you."
He said, "Come work for me." And Lestat is like, "Wait a minute, what?" And let's just say the devil provides sufficient enough proof that he is in fact the devil. And he not only tries to recruit Lestat, but he literally gives Lestat an explanation on why heaven and hell exist in the first place.
Okay.
And when I'm telling you, Anne Rice writes it in such a way that it will have you questioning if she understands some things about how the universe operates that we may not understand as mere mortals. So it's just that good. The last few, if I remember right, let's see. The next book, dang it, I'm drawing a blank.
Yeah, hurry up.
Huh?
Vampire Armand.
Okay, so Vampire Armand, real simple. It's the complete backstory of Armand himself, and it goes way back to, like I said, I believe he was a slave back in like the I've forgotten what time period now. But basically, he was a slave who got introduced to a vampire. He led a really sucky, painful life, unfortunately, before he became a vampire.
Of
And it
course.
made him a bit of an asshole after he became a vampire.
Of course.
But thanks to Lestat, he winds up becoming a little bit better. But it's a good story, but it's real heavy on the homoerotic stuff. If you're uncomfortable with that kind of stuff, it's skippable, but I think it's worth it because you miss out on some of the full picture that her story is trying to tell. It's a lot of homoerotic stuff in that book, but it's and I don't mind that usually, but it was just really heavy in that book. So it's one of those things
That's where she went to it.
yeah, and I get it. I mean, it was part of the story. It was part of the time and things that would have happened to a kid like him during those days. So I totally get that. I'm not saying it was even gratuitous, but it was just a bit much for me. That was just,
No, I'm saying as far as Anne Rice, she went there. So.
yeah. And so then the next book is Merrick. Okay, so this is where the vampire stories start to cross over into Anne Rice's other series, which is her witch series. So I'm gonna be able to kind of just wrap these up real quick. These last three. So
Yeah,
it's
'cause I gotta
Merrick.
pee, so.
It's isn't it Blackwood Farms?
Go ahead, talk about Merrick.
It's Merrick, Blackwood Farms, and I forgot the last one. But those three are crossovers basically with the Mayfair witches. So if you've read Anne Rice and you're familiar with the Mayfair witches, Merrick is the cousin of Rowan and Mona Mayfair. She's mixed, so she's biracial, black and white, and she eventually becomes a vampire. But the story of how she becomes a vampire is really cool. It's a cool story, and it can actually stand alone, really, as its kind of own thing. But it's a pretty good read. And then Blackwood Farms is the story of another Mayfair relative who winds up becoming a vampire. But this vampire can see a ghost that every time he sees him, the ghost viciously attacks him. And so this vampire seeks out Lestat to try to help him figure out how to stop this ghost from kicking his ass.
Okay.
Yeah. Okay.
Okay.
And then what was the title of the last one, Los? I forgot.
Last one, number 10. Blood Caddis?
Blood Canticle. Okay.
Cat-
Blood Canticle is the story of Marius. So this is where you get the full black back history on Marius himself, how he got turned, what was his life like, what his life was like before he got turned, how he got turned, and then all the things that happened to him up until basically like meeting Lestat.
Okay.
So that's like same thing with Vampire Armand. It's like all of his backstory up until the point where he comes into contact with Lestat.
Mm-hmm.
So that's but Marius is a cool dude. Like you really get to out of all the vampires in her books, he's my second favorite. I do love Lestat, but Marius is my second favorite. But yeah, he's just really like he's a good guy who just like made the best out of the situation he was dealt. He wasn't looking to be a vampire, none of this supernatural shit.
Shit
But
happens.
he tried to live what he thought of as a good life.
Shit happens.
Yeah.
Pretty much, right?
And when you're living that long, you get to be rich. If nothing else, just because you're around long enough to do shit. You know what I'm saying?
Shudders.
Shoot. Fuck that. Just give me immortality. Shoot. But thank y'all really for joining us on this conversation about some of my favorite books. I hope y'all got the impression that I really do enjoy the Anne Rice novels and the world that she created. And not just the vampire series, but her witch series as well, the Witching Hour.
We will revisit this.
Yeah,
go again in detail.
I could talk on these
All
individual
day.
books for days, but thank y'all for joining us. I'm gonna go ahead and wrap this up, and thank you, Bob, for sticking with me through
Yeah,
the
'cause
conversation. Appreciate that.
as I said, I only saw the movie, so I'm learning some stuff. So I hope y'all learn some stuff. And also remember, check us out Monday through Friday. We are here. Daily Smoke.
7 p.m. Central.
We try to give you what you need. And if you really want to talk about some things, any subject, no matter what it is, check out the website. And what's the website?
www.thadailysmoke.com.
And also remember that Cash App.
$TD Smoke.
Because, yes, we do need the donations. And if you can, $1.50, but, if you can do
Even
more than that,
$2.
if you can do more than that, $37.50. If you do more than that, we can
Take $2.50.
That way we can bring you better content, better product.
Yeah.
So check us out.
We're doing it all for you. That's why it's the People's Podcast.
Yes. If you have anything you need, we're here.
But thank y'all for joining us again. My brother Jam.
Brother Blackhand.
Brother Los on the camp.
Thank you for joining us on the smoke session. We are the Daily Smoke. We are out.
Peace.
Peace.